And I wanted to just say, for those of you who've been to the farmers market, and actually I pretty much think it's everyone, because I've seen everyone come when I had my table and also other times, you've seen some beautiful, beautiful watercolor paintings of Laura's. And I have to say, we had a visitor from California who I think became so enamored with her work, he bought a few
Oh
pieces.
yeah,
And also I think he was enamored with Laura.
we had a nice conversation.
So her work is now hanging in California. You know, it's like one of my necklaces went to Italy once. I was so thrilled. So, and Laura's is in California. It's nice when your work travels. And so she has a lot to say. And I think it'll be interesting from the point of view of watercolor and also Cuba and artist's journey. And so I'm going to turn the evening over. And I wanted to ask if at this point, maybe if people want, if there's any buzzing. Right now, it's such a small group, you don't have to mute. But if it starts to be buzzing, Anne will complain immediately and everybody will go on mute, correct? Just kidding. No, 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 unzip. And so Laura's going to take over. It's going to be recorded. And maybe if you have a question that you think that fits in that very moment, that's fine. But if you want to hold it to the end, that's also fine. Okay? Take it away.
Great. Well, I want to say thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate to be here, and it's really a pleasure to listen to the conversation and the community that you've built. It's very, I don't know if it's apparent to you, but it's definitely apparent to a newcomer that you have worked together over time, and you really share a mutual respect and community. It's really neat to see how we're able to do that even over Zoom. So um, I appreciate being here, and it's gonna be fun to share. I'm going to share my PowerPoint now, so I'm gonna put it up and hold on one second here. Share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see my screen and hear
Perfect.
me?
It's
Please
perfect.
call out if you can't do
It's
some of those.
perfect, Laura.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm principally a watercolor artist. I work with ink. This talk is about illustrated travel adventures from Cuba, Australia. I'll talk about some other places I've been. And I'm Laura Jones. My full name is Laura Quincy Jones. This is my family and my husband Yasser, and he's important to the whole context because in a lot of ways my journey as an artist led me to Cuba, which is a place I never expected to go in my life. And to meet him, he's Cuban. He lived in Cuba all his life, and we met there. We got married there. Our daughter Rosa here was born there, and then in that time, my art journey took a different turn when I started painting less and doing other things related to art, which I'll talk about as well. So they're an important part of my context. It's nice to meet you. And I'll give this information at the end, but I have a website that has a lot of different parts of what I'll be talking about, the travel blog, illustrations, things about teaching. I've been a teacher for a lot of my professional career. And I also have a kind of a gallery of fine art prints and cards that I sell there. And then we have another website for our travel business that my husband and I run, which is called Cuba Art Adventures. So I'll talk more about those things. And I just want to say, please jump in any time with questions about anything. We will have time for questions at the end, but I love hearing what you're curious about. So that should be great. I think that my well, really my journey as an artist started when I was a child. My aunt was an artist. I painted alongside her. But as an adult, I took art courses all my life. I never went to art school, but I always took art courses at art schools. I went to school in Providence at Brown, and I was able to take some classes at RISD and things like that. So um, as a young adult and young professional working in the field of education, I thought it would be fun to explore printmaking. And I joined the Mix It Print Studio in Somerville, which is a beautiful studio. And well, actually, before that, I learned monotype printmaking. And by joining the studio, I was able to experiment more. I was very interested in local images. And let me just scroll through a few of these. These are from some time ago, but these are images of Boston and Cambridge. You can see local themes. I was really interested in the impressions that we get when we live in a place. Like, what does it feel like to live in a place aesthetically? And how can I translate some of the impressions that get into my aesthetic subconscious onto paper? I wasn't interested in recreating a specific scene, but I love architecture and I loved incorporating those details, and I wanted to create a mood a little bit more. I also really loved uh, the way on a printing press you can layer your images. These are monotypes, so I was able to the shapes are made by stencils, which I drew and cut by hand, and then I would use all kinds of interesting different backgrounds. So I loved the surprise element of it, and the way the dynamic process of monotype printing kind of helped create this dreamy experiential representation of what I was feeling. My first time living in Boston and Cambridge, sort of like representing what it feels like, or what it felt like for me to walk around. I love to walk around the city and gather a variety of impressions. So, and I also was really curious about how people responded. I had done little shows of my art, previously, but I started to do more shows with the open studios through Mix It, and that was so fun. I love the open studios that we have in this area, to see how people respond and be able to have great conversations with people about the process and what you're doing and why you're doing it. And people buy things or they don't, but it turns out to be a great way of connecting with others. And that was an important part of my journey too, to see that people did, what I was making was resonating with people, and it was fun to do that. So it was a fun hobby, I would say. At that time, I continued teaching in urban education. I I had been doing education policy, but I decided I wanted to start teaching. I started in Boston. I moved out to California, and I taught in Oakland, California. I was teaching English and literacy for 3 years out there. And then I moved back to Boston, and I taught in the Boston public schools in high schools always for several years here. So that was completely time consuming, and I didn't have any time at all to work on art. Or I wasn't able to make that time, but I really love the work. But that was a big but important hiatus. And I think that really was the first big adventure of my life. And then later, the theme of adventure continued for me more as an artist and as a traveler. Let me show you also, I guess, sort of backing up before, uh, along the same lines. This is a series of prints. These were some of the first watercolors that I started working on that were part of the community supported art project, which is sponsored by the Cambridge Arts Council, and that was really fun. They had a challenge to make I think it was like 50 pieces of art, or maybe it was more, I can't really remember, but they would provide a budget for artists, and the idea was to produce a lot of art that was original in some aspect, but could be sort of produced at some scale, and would still leave funds as a stipend for the artist. So I thought that was really fun. The theme was kind of like a farm share, but with art. So I participated. It was lovely. You can see what I did here is I made the pen and ink drawing. I took a digital image of it and then had it printed with giclée printing on Arch's watercolor print paper. And then I watercolored over them. So the watercolor is the original part. The ink is printed on a giclée print. That was a good experiment. You can see at the bottom of this piece on the sidewalk, there's some tearing in the paper. I like to layer my paint a lot, and I realized this is a fun technique if you keep it very simple, but you can't layer much. So it was a good learning process for me too. But it came out with a lot of nice local images. And in this case, it wasn't really through the layering, it was more through the iterations that I was able to create the more experiential aspect of, being on the same street in different weathers and different times of the day. That has always been fun for me.
Laura, can we ask questions while you
Please
talk?
jump in. Yeah,
Okay, because sometimes it disrupts people's flow and
no, it's great.
wait to the end. So right away, I'm wondering, why would you want to print the ink on the paper rather than do everything on the paper rather than printing it? Does that make sense? Did I
Well, sure,
phrase that
it definitely does. I
correctly?
mean, I would prefer to do everything on the paper, but the challenge of this project was to produce a large number of pieces. I think it was more than 50, it was probably
Oh,
closer to
okay.
100
All right.
that were all supposed to be produced. And they provided a stipend to the artist. I think it was like
Oh,
$1,000, and they wanted you to produce it way under budget so that you would get paid for your time a little bit. So they kind of pushed everyone to find a way to not mass produce, but produce your art at scale. So it was a good experiment, but I think what I realized is I don't like doing that. I prefer doing, what you said is really taking time with the art and um, doing the whole
okay.
start to finish. And really those papers, giclée printing is a beautiful way of preserving our art or reproducing digital, but painting on top of those papers, even, it's a good quality Arches paper, but it has a film over the top that allows for the giclée printing. That's not great to paint on top of. It's
Okay.
possible, but it's not I learned, it was a learning process, I think, but um,
Were these images all displayed somewhere?
they were, in the end, there were many artists participating in this, in the community supported art program. And so they got sponsors who would buy shares of art. So the sponsor would pay, I don't know, $200. I'm not sure how much it was. And they were told they're going to get a box filled with art, with 10 original art items from all these different artists. Some were ceramic artists, some were, photographers, visual painters, different kinds of art. And the pieces were small, but original, at least in some, aspect. So that was really fun. I think it was like a surprise for the people, like a farm share, people got a lot of original things that they could keep or give as gifts. I don't know what they ended up doing with it, but it was a nice program. And I think that part of the idea was to support artists in professionalizing their work by, creating a budget, having a design for how are you going to do your work at some scale for a commercial audience, but still make some money from it. So that was nice to do. Yeah. Are there any other questions about that?
So that was sponsored by the city of Cambridge, and it was maybe restaurants or private individuals that participated in this program?
Yeah, I think it was private individuals. I don't really know who were the patrons, but we had kind of they had a party at the end where all the artists and the people that were getting their art boxes got to meet. I don't think that program exists anymore, but they did it for several years. That was nice. But those were some of my first illustrations. And then I decided that I needed to take a break in teaching. I love teaching, but I wanted to be really a complete learner again. I'm always learning from my students, but I wanted to just do something completely new. So after more than 10 years of teaching, I just put that on pause, and I decided I was going to turn a vacation into a much longer travel experience. I had planned to go to Australia actually and work on farms, on organic farms. So you'll see a lot more about that in a minute. But one thing that inspired me as I was sort of realizing, well, I just want to dive into this more. I do want to learn about farming. I want to learn about organic farming. I want to experience what it's like to really live on a farm. You know, I love nature and the countryside, but I never really lived there for a long time. But my mother had given me this book, Kate Williamson's A Year in Japan. And it's a lovely book. Kate Williamson. So this book was an inspiration to me. And when I saw it, I thought, wow, I could do something like that maybe. You know, it showed me a path of how I could bring art with me as I was traveling in very remote locations and rustic conditions. Kate Williamson, I think, did her undergraduate at Harvard. She got a Fulbright to go to Japan to study sock culture, and she made this book of illustrations about socks and many other details of Japanese culture on her travels. And each page has an illustration of some detail of life that or society that she noticed in Japan, and a very brief vignette of what it was and why it was significant. So it's very beautiful. And I liked the watercolor with ink illustrations. It was very powerful. So I kept that in my mind, and I thought, wow, if I'm learning about organic farming, maybe I could do something similar. This is basically a illustrated travel narrative for adults. I liked that idea, and I wanted to experiment with something similar myself. So I started, and as I went along, I also made a travel blog, which there's a link to this on my website, and I haven't updated it for some time, but it has all of the places that I was traveling over several years, where I was spending lengthy time in a variety of really interesting places. So I put a lot of photos on the travel blog and stories, but at the same time, I was creating illustrations. And I was working on the farm during the day, on lots of different farms. A strawberry farm was the first one, a sweet potato farm, a permaculture homestead, a blueberry farm, where I ended up spending 4 months living in my tent, and many other really, really special places. This was the first painting that I made. I ended up, got it off the plane and took the train up to the strawberry farm, and they put my bags down, and this was the little kitchenette for me and my roommate. And I thought, wow, that's different from my little studio apartment in Cambridge. It's even smaller. But I was just interested in documenting what I saw and experienced. So these are watercolor with ink. Most of them are sort of 12 by 18 or 18 by 24, smallish size. I called this the Open Road series. and I made these in Australia between 2011 and 2013. So the themes, these are some of the very early paintings. I'm just going to go through them gradually, but you know, the idea here is these are illustrated travel narratives, and I was interested in storytelling,
They're
really.
so beautiful. I love your sense of color.
Thank you. Well, they
Yeah,
were
and
fun to make.
the whimsy of them too.
Yeah, yeah, I love it.
I love the parrots and the composition.
I think
Ah,
this is the one my friend from California bought.
Ah, yeah. This is there are a few portraits, not too many, but these are the couple that owns the blueberry farm. They had grown up there, and
Wow.
I don't know, I was interested in, you know, I saw this as like as a narrative, and I was learning and felt that I was quite aware of a storyline to share, but I felt like it was an open-ended story, and I was interested in, you know, what are the images that are going to tell the story. And I was kind of thinking about painting like a guide or a curator, or at least a friend in conversation, pointing things out and giving my perspective, but leaving the conversation open. So I was really, I think, at this stage thinking of painting as storytelling. I was thinking of coupling these illustrations with narratives about the different farms. This is an apiary with an amazing apiarist in Tasmania.
So wait, you worked at this place, this apiary?
Yes, all these farms. And really, I was working all day. And some of the most interesting farms, I was just working too much to make any paintings at all, which sort of got in the way of the project, because I was trying to sort of document what I was experiencing. And in some of the places where I had, you know, quite a lot of experiences, I didn't always have the most paintings. But yes, this was a beautiful apiary.
Did you get badly stung at any point?
I didn't, but from what I understood, you know, the apiarist talked me down about getting stung. He said they're really actually, if you get stung by a bee, it hurts a lot, and it can, for obviously, if some people that are allergic, can be fatal. But some people believe that it actually the response, your body's response can overall be good for your health. So at least I didn't think, I knew I wasn't allergic to bee stings, so it was okay. I don't know if that's true or not, but anyway, it helped me not be afraid. This, for instance, was the table. He was so, go ahead.
were you doing these from life?
Yes.
Wow.
I would always do the sketching from life. Well, I mean, the scenes with people, that's why I have fewer portraits, really. I would take, like, piece together photos with the people, but all of the places I would really try to sketch the composition from life and then take photos as references for painting. Yeah, this was an amazing.
Your style is so inviting. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
your sense of line is casual but accurate. You know, I'm totally enjoying this.
Thank you. I'm glad you
too.
like
And the
them.
amount of detail.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love the pantry one. This is great. You have really good perspective lines too. My
Yeah,
husband's
yeah,
an
a lot of
architect and he would be
perspective.
impressed.
Yeah, a lot of perspective. I agree. And the lines just draw you in. I love what people are saying. The comments are exactly what I was thinking.
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. The sketching is an important and large proportion of it, because I really try to get like a sort of global perspective. It's definitely not the perspective that I get when I take photographs. I want to be able to just try to include a lot more that I see in peripheral vision. So it takes a long time to get the composition that really makes me feel like I'm there. What I'm seeing on the page is the experience of being in the scene. And really, you know, this is an interesting example because there's a lot of straight lines, but it it took quite a long time to try to place myself as the artist in the scene, and kind of appreciating the bent line as well. How that, how slight curvature of the lines, even when you're doing perspective.
And the
uh,
cropping
face and
too,
move.
because you see some stuff at the bottom. I have no idea what it is, but it doesn't matter. And then on the sides, it's almost like, yeah, it, as you described it, it's like we're there seeing it from your eyes. It's
Or
great.
it feels like we're in the room almost. And I
Yeah.
love your
I'm glad you
comments.
feel that way.
Yeah, that
Well,
reminds me of going to the greenhouses at the Lyman Estate, and you walk in
Oh,
and you look down. That's one of my favorite places on the planet, especially in the winter. And the one with the grapevines over, I'm assuming they're grapevines.
yeah.
That reminds me of being there, and the bougainvilleas overhead, and
Oh,
middle of February, and there you are, and it's blooming, and it's so nice, but you've got this great down the
yeah.
hall effect.
Yeah. And small spaces, this was a urban homestead that was a very, very small space, resourcefully used. So I'd like to show you the process, a little bit about the process. So for instance, for this painting, oh gosh, I guess we'll see it again. I'm sorry, that slide will come again. Let me show you a few more. So this was fun. Inside a little window. All of these paintings were very meaningful to me. Like, they were places and scenes that really impacted me as representing bigger ideas and bigger experiences that I was having. It was what was in front of me, but it was
Hmm.
meaningful,
Laura,
and kind of symbolic.
can you tell us where this one is taking place and also where the previous one, I love to hear where they are.
These are in Melbourne, Australia. I worked on farms for a little over a year, and then I decided I kind of came to an urban homestead with a greenhouse, and also this was a homestead a bit outside of Melbourne. But I decided that I wanted to stay in Melbourne. I was really enjoying painting so much, and I started working there's a beautiful environmental park in Melbourne where they give educational classes in ecology. So I was teaching a little bit there, and I was just painting really almost full time, probably 30 or 35 hours a week of painting. I just really wanted to focus on it, and I loved it. I think that's like the happiest. It was about 9 months or almost a year that I was doing that. I was just euphorically happy, diving into my painting with such energy. But yeah, that was great. So some of these scenes are actually from Melbourne, and some of them I had started the painting, but I was going back and finishing them.
Are you saying Melbourne or Melbourne?
Well, people there say Melbourne.
Oh, but it's Melbourne. I mean, what we would call
Yeah,
Oh, because I was
yeah,
there, that fence looked familiar to me, sort of, and I just wondered.
yeah. That's right. That's right. So this is a homestead in Melbourne. So let me show you this is the pencil sketch,
Oh, wow.
which really took a long time to get to this point, probably 10 hours to get that. That's a lot of hours. But
There's a lot of jars on those shelves.
yeah, and
I love this image. I just love it.
The details, yes, they do take time for sure, but really getting the orientation. I mean, this is simple enough because it's a small space, but getting the orientation of everything onto the page is just takes a lot. So then I ink over it once with a micron pen, a fairly fine micron pen, and erase all the pencil. So it's important that using a thick paper. I was using a good thick Arches paper So all the pencil is gone, one layer of micron pen. Actually, perhaps I then put in a little bit of pencil as the shadow of these herbs which are hanging, because that's going to be a shadow which I didn't want to delineate with pen. And now you'll see building up with layers of very diluted watercolor paint. And actually between the previous one and this one would be maybe a couple or several layers on each area as well. So it's not just
Wow.
one. And then more layers and more layers.
Oh
More
my God. It's like
detail.
magical.
But you can see between these photos, quite a lot of work is happening. And between this and this, oh yeah, there, part of what makes the end product, the color pops out a lot more when I go over again with ink and then again with ink. So almost all the lines have 3 layers of ink on them. And that does, the contrast of the ink with the watercolor does make it, the color pop out, and can clarify lines, which, I mean, I'm not a great watercolor artist without ink. I think the borders between shapes would be challenging for me. I mean, I like working with detail so I can control it, but I like the clean edge, although I also really like the variation in line that you get. Like, for instance, it's easy enough to see on this is like a freezer at the back, where, I mean, that's obviously, it should be in real life. It's a straight line. It's an item made in a factory, so it's not a human-made object. But the way the line of the pen traces over, and then because there are 3, I've gone over that line 3 times, there's parts of it appear thicker. You might even see some space between the lines. I really like that. I feel like it's like handwriting, and it creates motion and energy that is interesting to me. It's not sterile. It makes it, the whole environment, seem kind of human. And I think it creates more a feeling of storytelling. Like, these are objects. There's no person here in this scene, but you feel the humanity of whoever made all these jars, but hopefully also the artist too. So that's,
Laura, you said 3 layers of ink, but how many layers of watercolor?
oh, I can't even count. I mean, really a lot of layers.
So
No.
you said it takes 10 hours for the original sketch. I can't imagine how many hours it takes to do 3 layers of inks and many
No.
layers of watercolor.
I have a question for
It-
that. Do you do several paintings at the same time? Because the watercolor has to dry before you can put the next thing, the next layer. So do you have several?
Great
To
questions.
be in the middle of several at the same time?
No, I've never that you would think that would make sense, but no, usually I just work on one piece at a time. I don't do drafts of the piece beforehand. I just take it really slow and steady, and because I'm working with great detail in one little section at a time, then I just move over to another section of the painting. And there's so many different sections of every painting to work on. When I'm ready to come back to the beginning, it's dry for sure. So that's how it goes. I'm not, none of the shapes in the paintings are that large, really. So they do take time. It is important that it dries completely. I don't work wet on wet. I only work wet on dry, but it's never really a problem. There's always something else to do on the painting, and to kind of try to work it all up evenly, I think that's important to me too. So I don't want to just work on one section to be finished and then go to the next section. I want to kind of work up the whole thing at the same time. So, and Naomi's question about how this type of painting would probably take 40 hours. Some of the simpler paintings would maybe take 20. Like there's yeah, some of the simpler ones are about, but the whole thing start to finish, that's right. So it was kind of, I mean, I was working a lot at that time, so it was about a painting a week, but they were time consuming. Let me show you another example. This is a kitchen of a beautiful farm that I stayed on, a fun, very lively kitchen. So this is the pencil sketch, which also that, I mean, this was a lot more challenging getting all of the pieces of this and all the angles so that I could feel like I was there. You can see I had to bend a lot of the lines. Look at the counter on the right, you know, really that's a straight counter, but it's trying to, and the table, you know, to try to make the front of the table feel very inviting, like I'm right there. But it's definitely playing with the perspective, but in the interest of, you know, really our eyes, we have two eyes, they are round and they capture a lot more than the technical rules of perspective.
And I'm assuming you're
Of course.
working on fairly smooth paper to get the details like that.
Well, I actually really like working on cold press paper. This is cold press paper because when it comes to the paint, the tooth of it really gives more dimension, I think. And I don't even mind the bumpiness. I try to work in a controlled and detailed way, but I like the idiosyncratic variability of where the line, you know, where the line goes, and also how our eye corrects for it. You know, you know that's a counter, even though it might look like it, or the table. You know it's a table, but you know
Yeah.
it doesn't have square edges.
When I was in grad school, my best, most favorite teacher for pen and ink drawing for I was a medical illustrator, and he talked about the active line and how it had so much more energy, and there were many examples, but that was about the highest praise you could get. And your drawing, your ink lines have that active line component that he always talked about with such high regard. So I really love.
Thank you, Denise.
Yes,
For the technical aspect,
it gives a lot of energy. It's not sterile clinical perspective. Anyway, I love the work, and
I
I
have a
understand about
question.
the 40 hours and all that because
Do you use a bridge when you paint? Do you use a bridge on, because you say you can paint in different parts of your painting at the same time, which is really not how people are taught watercolor. You'd start with the top, then the bottom at the end. But do you use a bridge to rest your wrist, or do you use very long brushes? What is your
No,
what do you
just
do?
trying to be careful and mindful of, you know, just moving my hand. The paper is small enough, and when I'm painting, the pad is loose on the table, so I can move it slightly, you know, depending on the angle of my hand. I did most of these paintings in cafes, and I never had a studio while I was, you know, living abroad, and part of the reason I like watercolor is I could just put all the materials in my backpack, and it didn't really take up much space, so I would just carry them with me every day. No, I just moved it around and I really try, I mean, the paint is wet, it's not dry, but it's quite controlled in the space. And I would just say, along Darice's point about the active line, what I really learned is all that sketching and getting the details, knowing where all the details are going to be, lets me relax and have an active line. Because if I'm trying to make it up as I go, and I don't really know, you know, how does this where is the top of this jar? You know, how does this shape fit next to this shape? Where is the leg of the stool in relation to the table? And I'm trying to figure that out while I'm drawing with a pen. I'm going to lose it. But when I've sketched it enough to really know where the ink lines are going to be, then I can just draw with a little more fluidity. And if the pen moves, I like it. I don't mind. You know, it doesn't have it. I know that it's going to come back to the right. You know, the shape will have the orientation that I want it to. And it will have a little more dynamic flow. So I just really enjoyed taking time with all this, take time with the sketching, really get it right, work through the frustrations, take time with the painting section by section, just do what needs to be done and take care of it piece by piece, like build it up. No rush, but just enjoying the process. So you can see some more layers coming on here. And that's the final painting. There's quite a few layers in between here and here. The coloration is a little, I think for the digital images comes out differently, but.
Laura, I have two questions. One is, do you have a favorite paint? And the second
Oh.
one I want to ask you is, do you set up these scenes or are they actually exactly as you saw them?
They're exactly as I saw them. Yeah. The only time I set up a scene is if there's a person that I want to put in the scene, but usually it's a person that I know well. So I've taken photographs and I kind of try to capture the photograph that works, you know, with the angle that works with the scene. But
You said it's small. What size is your painting?
Most of these are 18 by 24 or even smaller, 12 by 18 maybe. My favorite watercolor paints are Winsor and Newton's. I always use Winsor and Newton. Yeah, but I don't, you know, I've always just used those and I never have any complaints. So it doesn't mean that I wouldn't like
and it's not a problem to put the ink over the pencil. It doesn't, like, with the greasiness of the pencil, it doesn't skip or anything.
That's a good question. The first layer of ink doesn't look like much. It's just sort of a placeholder. And I do think that's probably because of the interaction of the pen and the pencil. And then I erase aggressively over the whole paper. So I did that first layer isn't, let me go back here. You can see that's very flimsy looking ink. It's just marking the edges of the shapes. And it's really when the inking over starts to happen that I feel like the painting comes alive. I love color and I love the vibrant colors and warm colors, but I really think it's the line that tells the story.
Yeah.
So you're drawing in 2H or not 2B, I gather. Your pencil is a 2H, not a 2B or.
Yeah, I just use like a mechanical pencil that I can keep a sharp point, like, and lots of erasing while I'm sketching. I mean, every painting goes through stages where I feel like this doesn't look like anything what's going on here, but just keep working on it. So
I'm surprised that the watercolor looks so smooth. I would think that with all that erasing, the watercolor would be all kind of
grainy,
crumbly, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think the good paper has everything to do with it. And, you know, I always use a white eraser, just something that's not gonna hurt the paper. But if anything, I think it's just really important for me to erase completely, because if there is a residue of pencil, I think that's not great. It needs to get back. The eraser really kind of cleans the paper, I feel like, and then get all that eraser dust off. But thank goodness they make these beautiful papers, and for a sealed pad, I think that also I would never be able to work without a sealed pad or sealing it myself. Just
You mean a block?
Yeah. So let me show you some other paintings from Australia. I
Mm.
went on to, well, actually I went on to Japan. That's an example of I spent 3 months in Japan with a friend that I had met in Australia. And we lived on interesting homesteads all over Japan, but didn't make a single painting. I was so exhausted. We were working a lot. So that's still in my to-do list of backlog of paintings. But then from there I went to Russia. I spent 3 months in Russia. And I have to say it was a very powerful and beautiful experience. The country was beautiful, and I found people really fascinating and very kind to me. So anyway, I started in the Far East in Kamchatka and took the Trans-Siberian Railway across Russia, getting on and off and spending time in different places. So this is a little house in a lake in an island in the middle of Lake Baikal, which I think is the largest freshwater lake in the world, which is sort of in the middle of Russia. It's basically in the middle of Siberia. And this is what a lot of Siberian houses look like, all wood and with a blue paint around the window frame. And I asked someone, why is that always the case? And they said, well, the sky is blue. I think I like that answer. Actually, you see the sky through the window. So
Laura, what's the purpose of the lock on the outside of the second floor door?
Oh, I think it's probably, I'm not sure, but it might be material for animals. Like there was a farm, it was a home. I mean, it's a homestead. People are far from everything there. So
Interesting.
yeah, very simple, very rustic, but very beautiful also. This is closer to Moscow, a city, small town with a lot of churches. This is in St. Petersburg. I ended up spending a month in St. Petersburg. And this is also in St. Petersburg. Very peaceful, sort of haunting. Everything is so big in Russia. The streets are big, the buildings are big, but there's a lot of elegance as well. This is a cafe, which is actually, Singer sewing machines.
Yeah.
Well, this is the Singer building. I don't know what the connection was with Singer to St. Petersburg, but it's a very elegant cafe. And I sat there nursing that piece of chocolate cake and tea for as long as I could to get the painting, the illustration.
How did you communicate? Do you speak Russian?
No, I learned a few words of
How did you
Russian, and I
communicate in
just,
Russia?
by that point, I had been traveling a lot, and I just was pretty good at sign language. And, people, I don't know, are very, I think, quite kind to an individual traveler, and wanted to try to help figure it out. Sign language, basically, and sort of basic vocabulary.
That cake looks amazing. What's the word for chocolate?
Oh, I can't remember,
Do we
but Russians
remember?
love their sweets. That was
Oh yeah.
fun.
Wow.
Yeah.
So now from there, I came back to the US for about a year, and I did more painting and some more teaching. But I went to then I went to Cuba. I was just interested in finishing some of the paintings that were on my list that I wanted to keep working on. But actually, I got, not surprisingly, captivated by Cuba, which is a beautiful and fascinating culture with great people. So
How old are you at this point?
When I started traveling, I was in my late 30s. So when I went to Cuba, I think I was 39 when I first went. Yeah, 2016. So I decided for this series, I wanted to make things that were more the size of a postcard. So these are smaller, they're less detailed, they're quicker. They include more street scenes and
But still the
place
same
scenes.
process, still the same process.
all the same process. Instead of working at a cafe, well, this mostly I worked on these at cafes also, or just wherever I could take my work. It really actually was helpful to work on something very small that I could take out wherever I was sitting, in the park or at the library, or, at a cafe or even at a bar. I was by myself, so I just wanted an excuse to hang out around people and keep myself busy, I wasn't pretending, I was doing something until the lights got too dim. And it was really fun. In this case, though, these paintings are different because Cuba was very fascinating to me, but it was kind of an enigma. I didn't have a sense of narrative. I didn't know what was going on. Really. I was just documenting what I saw in front of me. I thought, I don't know what the big ideas are here. I'm just here to learn that, but I'm just gonna paint what I see. So collectively, I think they show that, but it felt different for me from the images in Australia where I had I mean, it's similar to an extent where you see a scene and it just feels salient and beautiful and captivating.
Wow.
But
I love these.
Me too.
thank you. Some of it, like this one, is much more detailed. This is a longer painting, but the others, this is the size of the other
A lot
ones.
of detail. Oh, I love the little pigeons at the top.
Yeah, the details of everyday life. I think I'm really fascinated by that. And it's a fun way to travel as well. It really helps focus your attention. I really found by sitting in one place, watching, sketching, observing, or just painting, it really was a wonderful way to get to know the country. I mean, you could just say sitting for 3 hours on a bench in the park or in a cafe for a long time. Like, why aren't you out doing tourist things? But I learned so much by doing that, life going on around me and observing and feeling it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I think I was really able to soak in a lot. And so, I enjoyed that I was making something that was documenting some life, but I really, as a travel strategy, even if I was going to just recycle all the paintings and didn't care what they looked like, that time that I spent painting brought me in touch with the culture. And it's probably part of what drew me to come back to Cuba several times. I went there first just for 2 months in 2016, and then I went back a few times that year. I met people that were really fascinating, young people too, a lot younger than me, who said such profound, interesting things that really made me think when I came back. And I went back a couple of times, and then I decided I wanted to just try living there. I had lived in Australia, I didn't really want to live in the US at that time. So I went to Cuba in 2017 to live there, and I did some more paintings, but I also started bringing some of the people that had participated in my adult education painting classes. At that time, when I was back in the US, I was teaching a variety of different things, but one of them was adult ed painting. And when they knew I had gone to Cuba, they said, "Oh, we want to go with you." I like to travel by myself. I don't really know anything about tour guiding, but actually I realized that some of the people that I had met in Cuba were guides or were interested in guiding. I had stayed in a lot of different guest houses. I had learned a lot about how to navigate a fascinating but challenging and sort of confusing context. So eventually they twisted my arm and we brought a group, and then we brought another group, and then we brought another group, and then we realized this is a fun small business. So we called it Cuba Art Adventures. It started with artists, but in the end, few people wanted to do painting. Most people wanted to do sort of cultural immersion activities with other people that cared about art and culture. So that's what we've been doing since then. We've run many tours. For the first tours were kind of set groups, but now we do things like this. You can see this on the website if you're interested. It's, you know, a basic template, and people adjust it as they want. So usually we have groups of family or friends who want to explore Cuba's streets. We do a lot of walking around. We go to dance and music shows, we eat good food, stay in beautiful guest houses. And it's really a chance to get to know the culture by getting to know people, and, you know, in an authentic way. So people, this is one of our groups. That was a group of family and friends. Here's another group of one of the young people. Here's someone on one of our trips painting. Some people dive right in with their paints, but some people take a lot of photos and come home and paint. This is in the countryside outside of Havana. So this was another experience of art for me, teaching a little bit.
Laura, I actually painted that scene. I have it right up on my wall.
This scene at Fosterlandia?
with bombs.
Ah, beautiful. But there are so many amazing things to see that are really breathtaking and fascinating. So I think it's been important to me as an artist to back off and not push people, you know, let them experience a place. You know, I've had the privilege of traveling for longer periods of time, months at a time. So I'm not in a rush. I can walk around, absorb it. I know I'm going to be there. I have time to put 20 hours or 40 hours into a painting and feel the culture around me. But most of the people that we bring are just here for a week, and they feel overwhelmed by the new culture and all the visual, beautiful stimulation. So I don't want them to be distressed. I want them to enjoy that flood of experience and, you know, take away images. It's kind of helping to curate an experience. So that's been a lot of fun, and seeing, you know, which people, like this person on the left, she's been taking classes with me for a long time, and she just jumps right in. She knows what she wants to do, and she gets it done. But a lot of other people just like to take photos, walk around and experience. So talking with them about what they're experiencing and making sure that they're feeling happy and safe and able to receive all of those experiences has actually been, I consider it like an important part of the artistic experience.
Laura, I have two friends who went to Cuba, and they both loved it. One was a person who went by herself, and the other one was a couple. But they both said that they did have the feeling at times that they were being sort of followed or watched or whatever, you know. And I was wondering if you ever had that feeling, and also if you felt all these countries that you've gone to, I feel like you must be this incredibly brave, fearless person. And I wondered if you ever had moments of like fear or just, you know, Russia, Cuba. I mean, I don't know. I just wondered if you could say a little about it.
Yeah, I have had some colorful stories. I've never, you know, nothing actually bad has ever happened to me. I have been in some difficult situations, but I think the vast majority of experiences are really positive, and I have learned how to travel in a way that, you know, I'm able to get out of difficult situations or prevent them from happening. But you know, everyone has to feel that out for themselves. I sometimes I teach classes, adult education classes about solo travel, which is a fun theme. But I think that one thing I always say to people is having a purpose to your travel really, in a way, keeps you safe. You are focused. You have a aura about you that you know what you're doing, and you want to be doing something there. You know, you're not sort of just like floating around, or, you know, if you are in a place enjoying it as a tourist, enjoy it in that way. But for people coming to Cuba that want to be there for a short time and just take it in and not worry too much, I've really experienced how it's great to have a wonderful local guide with you. So I've really been happy to be able to help create good jobs for amazing Cubans
Oh,
who
wow.
are so well educated and so dynamic and great at introducing people to their country, and then match them up with visitors who, you know, they're with you, it's not a traditional guide that's like has a canned speech. It's a dynamic process of just sort of introducing someone to a culture. And I feel a lot better about that because I think people are safer when they're, and just more relaxed when they're with. Cuba is a very safe country, really, compared to
Yes.
many other, you know, vacation spots. But you know, you stand out as a visitor, and it's nice. There's no reason not to get to know local people in a down-to-earth way. So that's been a lot of fun. We actually, this is there was a nice spotlight on our business on this website, which is called Sabbatical Homes. So that was nice. And I also, I'll just mention this as another aspect. So in the last years, I have moved away from painting so much. We've been doing these tours, especially before the pandemic. We have started them up again now, but I also was doing watercolor workshops, and I've started that again, which has been a lot of fun. Small groups of people working on independent projects, but supporting one another and getting a lot of individualized support. So that's been fun. And I'm just sharing that with you just as a step of the process for me, you know, exploring what is it to be an artist and having shows. I went through a period of time where I had my paintings reproduced as giclée prints, but at a great printing press in the South End. They make these beautiful prints, and I showed them in a lot of cafes and open studios type events and shows. And now in the last year, I've done a lot of art fairs and shows, selling these fine art prints and selling these cards. I made them all into, almost all of the images into greeting cards. I sell them as individual cards and as packages. The packages have 12 cards, and there are a bunch of different packages. You know, some have urban themes, some have country themes, one has a Cuba theme. So these events are so, like the Belmont Farmers Market, and a fair in Harvard Square where I met Naomi. They're really fun events to do, but it's a challenge. I can say, let me just go back to this. I enjoy painting even more than doing all these shows, but it is but it's a good experiment to see, you know, different ways of making, you know, connecting income and art. And it's been, you know, interesting for me to do the calculation about how much investment is needed to do these shows. At least for me, I have to put a lot of money into producing the prints and producing the cards and paying for the shows and all the materials needed. And the profit at the end of the day is not astronomical. So it just shows me how painting is for the love of the painting. And for that case, maybe I should just go back to the painting because I do enjoy. You know, the best part about the shows is not really the income, it's talking to people and the connections that you have with people. You know, many times I've had great conversations with people and they buy one postcard, but the conversation has been priceless. So that's part of the mix, and I think that's been part of my experience as an artist. So I'll share that with you, and I'm happy to go back to any of the slides, and I would love to share have some time for questions. Now, I'm sorry that I've gone a little bit over. So.
Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You know, it's funny that you say that. I lose money every year, but I always say, and so do some of my friends. And I always say, you know, but the thing is, I can't not. That's the whole thing. I can't not. So, you know, you just have to accept it.
Yeah.
So
That's
you're
right.
living back here now?
We are, yeah. We were in Cuba through 2021. through the first part of the pandemic, and it was difficult. It was difficult. So it took a long time for us to be able to come here, for the airports to be open, for my husband's visa to be available. And when we finally came here, we decided it's actually safer for us to stay here. It was difficult being in Cuba at that time, but you know, since then, we spend a few months of the year back in Cuba. We'll be there all through February. Usually we spend a month or two in the winter and then a month or two in the summer. So it's nice to keep a connection there. We have a little apartment in central Havana, and yeah, it's great to be able to go back and forth, but we feel really fortunate to be have a community here, and our little daughter, you know, she's in preschool, so that brings another layer of fun community and liveliness. So yeah.
So is Cuba, would you say Cuba is your favorite place you've lived in?
Well, it's hard to say favorite, but it's definitely the you know, place, after all, being in quite a number of different countries, Cuba was the place that I said, wow, I think I would like to live here for my life. You know, I really could imagine loving it, you know, over time. And yeah, I feel very fortunate about that. But it's been a series of great experiences traveling. I feel really fortunate.
Oh, such an adventurous life.
I wonder what, you know, the theme of travel and painting, have others done a lot of travel painting, or is that something that you've experimented with, or how does that resonate for others?
I've done some in France, in Japan, in Brazil, and did a lot of photos, and usually I would sketch wherever I was going, watercolor sketches actually. And then, because I found that if I just continued sketching, I was better off taking photos and sketches than just I missed out a few things, I felt. So it took me a long time before I found an equilibrium between the two. And then I found that going back to the studio and painting from photos plus the sketch was the easiest for me. But for my mother, who was a painter, she would just look and then go back to the studio and then do her thing with the
Wow.
studio. So, but I think everybody's different. And also what I found, is that, I don't know if you picked some of those things in Japan and in France. The papers are different, the colors are different. First of all, what you see is different. So the colors you see are different. The colors they sell, the painting colors they sell are different. So my studio is filled with all that stuff, and it's a bit much, but I'm getting back to it little by little. I've done watercolor
Sounds fun.
yeah, it's fun. Yeah. I'm interested in,
I
there was
love that.
one of your paintings, you showed the final painting, which had a lot of red. It was the kitchen with the table in the middle, but you also showed a painting you did in between, which I thought was very attractive. Bluer. It had more blue. Do you know what I'm talking
Uh-huh.
about?
I think it was just
Sure.
a different digital image
Yes.
color
Yeah.
gamut.
Right. I think that
I think I remember that too.
Yeah.
perhaps something like this,
More.
Yes. And there was another
this,
one also, yes. And the one underneath the,
yeah.
So actually, all these different steps in themselves are artworks.
Yeah.
I felt that the final one is beautiful and wonderful, but the in-between, sometimes I've looked at them and I really was enthralled. For example, on your screen, the one that's above the painting that we are seeing, I think
Uh-huh.
it's very beautiful. It's
Mm.
really lovely. I mean, I don't know
Yeah.
how other people feel, but it really talked to me a lot.
I love the final.
Of individual.
Oh, I do too, but I like both very much.
Do you take, well, you do take photos, so you have a record of the steps that you've gone through.
Yeah, but it's a good point about taking more photos. It's something that's probably interesting for all of us to document your work in progress. This is an interesting issue that always seems to come up in the watercolor workshops that we do about when is something finished and your feelings about stopping or continuing. And I think it is individual. It's what really draws some people to sketchbooking and some people to create really finished pieces. I know for me, the happiness that I feel when I see the finished painting and the feeling of completion just makes it worthwhile to keep going. Even when I like the interim phases, I just feel like, oh, it's going to be better, even better when I keep going. So that's my
Well,
taste for this work. But
I like hot press paper. And I also travel a lot and have taken my watercolors. That's one of the things I loved about watercolor. Love is that you can get one backpack and put everything you need
yeah,
in the backpack. Very portable.
right.
But I liked the freedom of the watercolors. And so sometimes I won't use any pencil at all and just do it
Mhm.
or painting. And if I don't like it, I can just throw it away.
Yeah, yeah.
But I love working. I don't like the cold press paper. I never could get used to cold press. I always felt that for me, it interfered with the image I was after.
Yeah, yeah. If you also, I think your technique with water, um, what your water is doing. If you have a lot of water, if you have very controlled water, it behaves very differently. The water element as well as the paint element on the cold press and the hot press.
But for me, it was a break from all of the writing and editing and publication that I was doing in my job. So the watercolor for me was just freedom, you know.
Yeah. So luminous. I think watercolor is a medium where you don't have to do much and you get a lot of brilliance. You know, you can do a lot, but even with a bit of watercolor, the color and the luminosity are just very inviting. So a watercolor sketchbook is always a great treasure to have.
And
No.
sometimes adding some gouache to watercolor paintings will do quite a bit, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I found that sometimes I've used gouache on top, I mean, with watercolor. It gave a different feel, gives a different feel to the painting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I
I used
noticed you're
to,
not
oh, sorry.
using black. You're not using any black.
Me?
Yes.
I do use black sometimes, like for instance in the kitchen floor here. I actually like to use some black. Let me this one definitely has, I think all my paintings have some dark darks, but that's always an interesting question of how dark to push something.
You had one that had a lot of black shadow.
Oh, on the table and
with
the,
with the little dog. There was a
Black
dog.
or blue shadows.
this,
No, not that one. There was a dog.
The one with the dog.
Yeah, the dog.
yeah. Yeah, darks for sure. Yeah, blacks. Yeah.
I used to do a
interesting.
lot of drawing when I would travel. And then I finally got my act together and did some trips with oil paints.
Oh,
And that was just a real challenge to travel with oil paints and, you know,
I bet.
big suitcases and heavy and time consuming to set up. And then I had a friend who was a very good watercolor painter, and she would come back from trips with these wonderful little gems. And I was so inspired that I said, I'm going to learn watercolor painting specifically so that I can take watercolors traveling, so I can have a more compact kit. And that was about, I don't know, 6 years ago. And I haven't touched oil paints since. I've just really gotten to enjoy learning watercolor. And I assume I'll go back to oil painting again, but I feel like I'm just enjoying exploring it and feeling like I'll be so much more ready to travel with paints.
Well, my mother had a trick, which she was using oil pastels.
Ah,
So
yes.
you have oil
Ah,
pastels. You can actually travel, do oil paintings, and walk around with your oil pastels a box, you know. And you can do it on paper, and then when you come home, you can with the with turpentine or whatever oil, linseed oil, whatever material you wish to use, you can turn it into an oil painting. The same thing goes for watercolors without having water, because there are times when you can't get clean water. I mean, it's happened to me to be in the countryside, so I use caran d'ache, and they're watercolor
Oh.
pencils. And when you go home, you know what I'm talking about. When you go home, you just add a little, you use water, and again, you're talking about just a box of pencil, and you need a good sharpener. That's about it. That makes
Yeah,
your life
interesting.
considerably easier.
I just want to say thank you so much, Laura. It's getting so
Yeah.
Yes,
have to
thank
be-
you.
for plumbers in the morning.
Thank you very
Irene,
It's-
thank
much.
you for sticking with us. I know you have to get up early tomorrow.
Yeah.
Irene, it was great to see you, because I know a lot of times you're too tired because you have so many other things going on. It's great to see you this evening and
I
to
loved
meet
the presentation, Laura. Thank you so much. This was really
Yes.
Thank
you,
you.
Laura.
This has been a pleasure.
Laura, this
Thank
was
you, Laura.
super interesting, and I really enjoyed it as a watercolor painter.
Well,
Was
you
an
I just wanna
architect
say-
husband, so I really enjoyed the architectural illustration aspects of your work as well. So
I
terrific.
think this is a good place maybe to end, if that's okay with everybody. And just want to say thank you from all of us. It's been really wonderful seeing just a kaleidoscope of color.
Yeah.
I'm so glad that we were able to have you join tonight and present these beautiful paintings and your travel journey. So
Yeah.
until
Thank you.
February, I want to wish everybody a good night. And Dari, I know you do too.
Yes.
And so I will end the meeting and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Great.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good
Bye.
night, everyone.
Send us what
Bye-bye.
you like. Bye.
Bye.
Great. Bye-bye.
Bye.